Nicholas Eymeric, whose dates are circa 1320 to 1399, was a Catalan Dominican from Girona who rose to the office of Inquisitor General in the Crown of Aragon, a composite Mediterranean monarchy spanning Aragon, Catalonia, Valencia, Majorca, and Sardinia, which at the time had dynastic ties to Sicily. This region was a circulation route where learned wizards and clerics wrote, translated, and traded all manner of books of magical rituals that local officials and magistrates struggled to police. Eymeric's career unfolded at the end of the infamous Avignon papacy, the so-called Babylonian captivity, in a polity where royal officials, bishops, and inquisitors often competed over who could judge which crimes. Our inquisitor read his theology and canon law closely. He argued from authorities, and he fought repeated jurisdictional battles with King Peter IV of Aragon. He even at one point campaigned against the teachings associated with the famous polymath philosopher and Franciscan tertiary Raymond Lull, a fight that sharpened his interest in drawing clear lines between mere heterodoxy and forms of worship that the Church judged heretical and were therefore worthy of extirpation by the Inquisition of heretical depravity. The Directorium Inquisitorum, or Inquisitor's Guide, completed in 1376, grew out of this world. It is part manual of procedure and part classification of offenses, written for fellow Dominican friars who had to decide when a curious ritual belonged in an episcopal court for superstition and when it crossed into heresy, which was the Inquisitor's jurisdiction. The work is particularly important because it continued to be used beyond the Middle Ages by both the Spanish and Roman Inquisitions. The Directorium belongs to a moment when two currents met: the consolidation of inquisitorial procedure across Western Europe, with the Cathar heresy having been recently more or less exterminated, and the proliferation, within clerical and university circles, of ritual handbooks for conjuring spirits. Inquisitors were charged with prosecuting heresy, not every religious irregularity. Bishops' courts handled most superstition cases, and royal magistrates guarded their own prerogatives. The practical question, therefore, was jurisdictional. Under what conditions do practices labeled as nigromancia cease to be ecclesiastical misdemeanors and become the kind of apostasy that an inquisitor of heretical depravity can try as heresy? Question 43, the passage we'll be looking at today, takes up this case that preoccupied many 14th century churchmen. Learned conjuration had circulated through clerical networks for generations, the so-called clerical necromantic underground, as Richard Kiekefer put it. Handbooks, treatises, and grimoires taught circles, scrying, and the use of divine names towards various magical ends. But Eymerich dealt with this issue in a thoroughly scholastic manner. He reframed the problem with a theologian's distinction that every educated reader of his day would have recognized: the distinction between latria, the worship owed to God alone, and dulia, the kind of veneration you find given to the saints. That pair of Greek terms came into the Latin West from the image theology debates of the 8th century, and by Eymerich's day, it served as a standard way to sort out various acts of cult. Eymerich believed judges should look for outward acts that signal worship or pledged obedience to spirits. Sacrifice, incense, hymns, prayers, vows, and prostration all counted as cultus daemonum, and therefore as heresy. Hybrid petitions that mingled demonic names with saintly intercession were evidence of a misdirected dulia, and this required correction. Technical rites with no visible honor to a spirit, circles, scrying, the use of a child medium, etc., were still censurable, but they didn't by themselves prove apostasy. Eymerich's move did several things at once. It gave the Inquisitor a recognizable doctrinal test, rather than a loose catalogue of tricks. It raised the evidentiary bar by requiring acts that can be read as worship or the making of pacts that renounced the covenant with God. And it also quietly protected inquisitorial jurisdiction from episcopal or secular encroachment by marking the threshold at which magic becomes heresy. So, without further ado, we now turn to the text itself. Our source for this excerpt, translated out of Latin, is adapted from Edward Peters' The Magician, the Witch, and the Law, 1978. The 43rd question asks whether those who invoke demons, either magicians or heretics, or those suspected of heresy, are subject to the judgment of the Inquisitor of heretics. It appears to the inquisitors from the aforementioned books, and from other books, that certain invokers of demons manifestly show the honor of latria to the demons they invoke, inasmuch as they sacrifice to them, adore them, offer up horrible prayers to them, vow themselves to their service, promise them their obedience, and otherwise commit themselves to the demons, swearing by the name of some superior demon whom they invoke. They willingly celebrate the praises of the demon or sing songs in his honor and genuflect and prostrate themselves before him. They observe chastity out of reverence for the demon, or abstain upon his instructions, or they lacerate their own flesh. Out of reverence for the demon, or by his instructions, they wear white or black vestments. They worship him by signs and characters and unknown names. They burn candles or incense to him, or aromatic spices. They sacrifice animals and birds, catching their blood as a curative agent, or they burn them, throwing salt in the fire and making a burnt offering in this manner. All of these and many more evil things are found in consulting and desiring things from demons, in all of which the honor of latria, if the above things are considered intelligently, is clearly shown to demons. If, note well, the sacrifices to God according to the Old and New Law are considered, it is found that these acts are true sacrifices only when exhibited to God, and not to the demons. This, then, is the case with the first category of those who invoke or speak on behalf of demons. And by this manner, the priests used to invoke Baal, offering their own blood and that of animals, as one reads in the 4th Book of Kings, 18. Certain other invokers of demons exhibit to the demons they invoke not the honor of latria, but that of dulia, in that they insert in their wicked prayers the names of demons along with those of the blessed or the saints, making them mediators in their prayers heard by God. They bow down before images of wax, worshipping God by their names or qualities. These and many other wretched things are found described in the aforementioned books, in which the honor of dulia is shown to demons. Indeed, if the means of praying to the saints which the Church has diligently instituted are considered, it will clearly be seen that these prayers are to be said not to demons, but only to the saints and the blessed. This, then, is the case of the second category of those who invoke demons. Yet certain other invokers of demons make a certain kind of invocation in which it does not appear clearly that the honor either of latria or of dulia is shown to the invoked demons, as in tracing a circle on the ground, placing a child in the circle, setting a mirror, a sword, an amphora, or something else in the way before the boy, holding their book of necromancy, reading it, and invoking the demon and other such like things, as is taught by that art, and proved by the confessions of many. This, then, is the third way of invoking demons, and by this means Saul invoked the spirit of the python through the pythoness. In Saul's invocation, it is seen, no honor was done, neither latria nor dulia, as one reads in 1 Kings 26. The case or conclusion is that if the invokers of demons show to the demons they invoke the honor of latria by whatever means, and if they are clearly and judicially convicted of this, or if they confess, then they are to be held by the judgment of the Church, not as magicians, but as heretics. And if they recant and abjure heresy, they are to be perpetually confined as penitent heretics. If, however, they do not wish to desist, or if they say they wish to desist and repent, but do not wish to abjure, or if they abjure and afterwards relapse, they are to be relinquished to the secular arm, punished with the ultimate penalty according to all canonical sanctions which judge other heretics. This conclusion may be deduced in 3 ways. First, from the sayings of the saints and doctors of theology. Second, from the sayings of the doctors of canon law. And third, from the decisions of the Church. Now, Eymerich's closing prescriptions, perpetual imprisonment for the penitent heretic, and relaxation to the secular arm for the obstinate or relapsed, reveal what's truly at stake. Once the act of worship has been objectively proved, the invoker is legally reclassified from magus to hereticus. And this is less of a moral judgment on curiosity than it is a jurisdictional granting device. It equips inquisitors with a doctrinal key that unlocks the machinery of the Inquisition once it's been proven that specific external acts are present. Now, it may seem odd to say this, but in this sense the text is fairly restrained. It prevents overreach by tying the gravest penalties only to demonstrable latria, not merely to paranoid accusations of witchcraft or baseless superstition. At the same time, the scheme is quietly expansive. By treating vows, genuflections, hymns, or incense as affirmative signs of worship, Eymerich gave prosecutors a template for inference. If a rite looks and sounds like a cult, it can be prosecuted as a cult. His middle category, misdirected dulia, also widened the field. It pathologized hybrid devotions that mingled saintly invocation with demonic names and aligned them with other perceived religious error. The third category, where no overt worship is visible, is the most revealing historically. It acknowledged a repertoire of learned techniques that do not obviously entail adoration, yet still presume traffic with spirits. Later demonologists like Heinrich Kramer in the Malleus Maleficarum would increasingly treat such technical operations as implicitly pact-bearing, thus collapsing Eymerich's gray zone and making any form of conjuration evidence of allegiance to satanic forces. This little interpretive shift in part helps to explain how a 14th century concern with clerical necromancy eventually fueled the fires of the early modern stereotype of the witch as a member of a satanic conspiracy and a diabolical sect bound by a pact, whether implicit or explicit, a stereotype which led to the death of about 40,000 women over the course of the next 300 years. Now, I wanted to highlight this source to show you how this later confounding of magic, maleficium, and collective devil worship all into one image, the image of the witch, was not arrived at all at once. It was a gradual and cumulative process, hence why we call this image the elaborated or mature or cumulative theory of witchcraft, which only came to a head at the end of the Middle Ages and the beginning of the modern period. This image or category had only become conceivable via an accumulation of legal texts precisely of this sort, texts which established thresholds for what sort of activities were acceptable in the eyes of the law and what sort were not. Texts which had their own kind of binding power when put to use by secular and ecclesiastical authorities, against those whose desires led them to tread secretly outside the bounds of orthodoxy into dimly lit and smoky chambers, filled with all the signs and symbols of their forbidden operations. If you would like to support more work such as this, please visit patreon.com/themodernhermeticist. And above all, thank you for listening.